Hi guys, it's Christina Ray. I'm back with an astrology video for you. So let's talk about Lino of Stray Kids for a second. Now, before I get into it, a quick disclaimer. There's no confirmed birth time for him. Mind you, I did find that in some episode or like V Live when it was a thing, he did say 8. Now, there was no specification as to whether it was AM or PM. So I kind of did a little bit of digging on both. And after looking at both AM and PM options, and obviously just watching, like, just really taking in how he interacts with the members and how he moves, and just the way that his career has like unfolded thus far, the 8 p.m. chart it makes a little bit more sense to me. So for this breakdown, I'm using whole sign houses. I know I've seen people out there like pull up his chart for AM or PM, and it's on like Placidus. I don't mind using other systems, but I just practice astrology with a Hellenistic lens, so I'm using whole sign house system. So the 8 p.m. chart gives him a Gemini rising as opposed to the Scorpio rising, and of course you'll see that with the Gemini rising time, all his Scorpio placements shift to the sixth house. So we're talking about like his focus, his habits, his energy, and it just kind of runs through like a sixth house theme to me. So just remember that this is not a fact. This is not concrete. It's just my personal interpretation of his chart. And if his real time does come out, we can always revisit. Okay. Now let me pull out the share my screen with y'all. Um, okay. All right. Okay. So why does the 8 p.m. chart resonate with me? Honestly, I also think that 8 p.m. is too exact in the sense that like sometimes when somebody tells you, "Oh, I was born at 2 p.m.," most likely they were born at like 2:05, 2:06, somewhere with a couple minutes. So again, this might be wrong too. But again, taking into consideration that he said 8, combining AM and PM, just looking at it, I went ahead with the 8 p.m. and I'll explain myself through this whole analysis. So this would give him a Gemini rising, which the first thing that stands out is how his duality shows up, right? He's very serious, very reserved, but he also has this like fun and playful, almost sarcastic personality to him. So you see that with a lot when he's interacting with the members, like sometimes on stage, sometimes off screen, but then sometimes on like interviews, he's like completely silent and composed. So you see that there's this duality to him, right? And it's very like Gemini rising. So this chart has at 15 degrees of Gemini, and it shifts all these Scorpio placements to the sixth house. Now, I do want to highlight that this also puts his Jupiter up here in the 10th house, and it's Jupiter in Pisces and it's retrograde. So it's at home in Pisces, using the traditional planets, um, and it's in the 10th house, but it is retrograde. So it kind of represents his career and like his reputation, right? But in a way, the way that I see it is, so we know that he's like team leader when it comes to the dance racha, right? But I feel like that Pisces placement, even though it's retrograde, right? It still gives him that flowiness that he has with like how he stands out as a performer, really. And it kind of gives his public image almost like an emotional sincerity to it. Like you could really tell that he's like flowing in his dance moves, right? Like people, like you can feel his presence even though he's not saying anything, but your eyes go to him, is what I'm trying to say. So it's like his artistry really hits you, and it's very subtle though. It's not like Jupiterian in the sense that it can be like loud, but it is very real and ethereal and like almost beautiful in a sense. I mean, honestly, like he's a great dancer. So that kind of makes sense to me as having that Gemini rising sign because he stands out so much. And when it comes to like performance, right? And this would also place the moon. One of the other things that really solidified this Gemini rising chart for me was his moon in the seventh house, which is right here at 26 degrees of Sagittarius. And what this tells me is there's because the moon rules our emotions and like what we internalize sometimes, it almost like because it's in the seventh house, it really shines through when he's with other people, aka the rest of the group. And it's almost like his emotional side lights up through the group, through the partnership that he has. And even like obviously with whenever he's with other members, but like when they're just like on duos, you can kind of see his warmth, especially with Han. So there's this emotional side that really comes out, especially when he's with other people, really. And with the moon in the seventh house, it really is like a way of his emotions really lighting up and coming alive through partnerships, through his connections, right? Now, like I said, this would give his sixth house all this Scorpio stellium. Now, why this stellium makes sense in the sixth house? So we have his Sun, Venus, Mercury, and then obviously his Chiron, which I'll come back to that. But on the morning chart, yes, puts him at a Scorpio rising, but it gives him a Venus Libra. I mean, I'm sorry, a Libra Venus. And on the 8 p.m., this is why I was saying like it's super important for me to know, um, it gives him a Scorpio Venus. So two different things, two different manifestations. But with the sun in Scorpio at 1 degree and Mercury there and Chiron there and Venus there, it's all in the house of work, discipline, and your daily like 9 to 5, right? But in this case for him, it's his daily craft. So this chart is someone who really lives in their art. And the sixth house is all about the process, right? The repetition, the quiet, like process that you go through with like mastering something. And Scorpio, it kind of adds an intensity to this process and almost like a privacy, like you want to like keep it contained in a sense. And you can kind of tell this this manifestation can be very visible when he trains, like when we see behind the scene content of like choreography and stuff like that, how precise he is and how every move to him feels very deliberate. So that's because he's the main dancer and like the team leader when it comes to dance racha, that Scorpio stellium really stuck out to me for this particular chart. Now, his sun, his vitality, and his like ego, right, is at 1 degree of Scorpio, which is like the beginning degree of a sign. So that's only going to add another layer to his sun sign because it's deep, it's transformative, like raw scorpion power that the sign of Scorpio is known for. So it's likely that he's learning to express emotion through restraint as well. So, how can I say more by like doing less? If that makes sense. Now, the other very interesting thing to me is that that would put Mercury and Chiron conjunct in the sixth house. And with that, there's a level of like wound when it comes to like perfectionism. But I feel like that is why he tries, I mean, that's why he has that role as like team lead for Dance Racha because there's a sense of perfectionism, but with purpose. It's not perfectionism to nitpick. And he will catch any like micro detail and almost find a way of like feeling like that is, how do I explain it? Like purposeful to him in a way. So it's almost, think of it this way. Those people that like create these tiny little art figures, right? There's a sense of almost refining the piece. right? Like when you look at like art, even like wooden art or like very microscopic type of art, these people are almost like finding peace in the act of refining that art, that project. And so that is what comes to mind with that Mercury in Chiron. And almost like repetition isn't to practice, it's actually soothes him. It's almost like therapeutic to him. And so when we see behind the scene content of, you know, choreographies, and he's like overwatching the members, the way that he can like notice what might have gone wrong, and it's not to be like, oh, he's a perfectionist. No, but it is to refine the choreography. It is to make sure that as a unit, they look cohesive, that at least, you know, you're doing it in a way that represents them as a group. And I feel like with him having Venus at 0 degrees of Scorpio, it also adds another element of the reason why he is the way he is as a um dance leader, because there's a sense of almost being devoted to the dancing craft, right? It's devotion through effort, and he shows that passion through how precise he is. And also, if you want to like incorporate it into his love life, it's in a way like how he shows love and loyalty, um not through words, but through how he like builds upon his craft, or if you're talking about relationship, in a sense it's acts, right? If we're approaching it from that sense. Now again, 0 degrees is like the beginning of any zodiac sign, and so it can be a little bit intense. It can be, you know, because it's at the start, it's learning the whole process of what Venus can offer in that sign, right? It's learning what real commitment looks like. And I feel like maybe for him, it's been a process to slowly like be able to show off some layers with the members. And for him, I feel the way that he's been, sorry, if you think of like an onion, you know, it has a lot of layers. So for him to show how he loves, how to like, how those layers slowly have been like peeling off. Sorry, I'm like talking really fast and taking in a lot of air, sorry. So it's loving through care. It shows up in everything that he does and interacts with, and how he approaches, you know, dancing and taking care of the members. It's literally love through care. Now, here's where I think he might be confused with like maybe being some sort of a perfectionist, but it's this Venus in Virgo in the fourth house, right? So that placement is for someone who builds with skills, but like underneath the surface at the root of things. And Mars is very precise as well. So in the fourth house, it kind of like almost becomes like a foundation of who he is. And in a way, that's why I feel like he is so talented as a dancer, because it's practice until his muscle memory type of like vibe for him. It's constantly doing it until it's second nature to him. And with um Saturn at 0 degrees here in the 11th house, I'm sorry, in the 12th house, with that, remember we talked about Saturn being like structures and all that stuff, but it adds like this quietness to it because Saturn here is ruled by Venus. So it's almost like a quiet self-control, but that's like behind the scenes because it is in the 12th house. And actually Saturn thrives in the 12th house. So it kind of comes at like second nature to be, to have that almost like self control. Um and yes, it's obviously not in like the sign that it loves. So people with like this type of placement, Saturn Taurus in the 12, can often continuously hold on to pressure privately when they don't need to. So it's also learning how to rest without guilt and learning that you don't have to carry everything else with you. So almost kind of throwing himself like onto that mantle of like, I can carry this, I can do this by myself, and not, being able to like, again, with his Scorpio placements, reveal those layers that he has. But it's been a process, and I feel like you can kind of tell if you watch like older Stray Kids Code episodes and stuff like that, or any like older interactions to now, there are certain levels of intimacy that he has allowed throughout those years, right? And with it being in 0 degrees of Taurus, it also means like he's finding, because it's at the beginning, he slowly has been finding his rhythm with being able to, rest without guilt, but also learning that he doesn't have to carry everything with him. Because when you're born and you have like degrees, like 0 degrees, for you it's going to be a learning curve for those certain placement that are at zero, because you're starting at the very start. So I feel like maybe once, you know, past military training and all that stuff, he'll come out a little bit more understanding in that sense. But, you know, hopefully by that time that Saturn in Taurus has matured to understand that you don't have to do things by yourself, right? You don't have to hold on to that pressure privately, that there is other people that you can kind of rely on. And I feel like that is very important, especially him, like, if he is the first member to go to the military, I feel like he is definitely going to, need to rely on the members and understanding that it's okay to do that. Sorry to bring that up, but it's just important. Now, his moon, like I was saying, it was in the seventh house at 26 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's where we really see how he expresses himself emotionally, like where his emotional truth lies. And in Sagittarius, it's all about honesty. So with Sagittarius, it's very, very rare that I've met any person with Sagittarius placements that can be like fake. I think for Sagittarius, it's like the sign of Sagittarius is so unfiltered. And having the moon, which is like how we process emotions and stuff like that, um, you really can't mask it. So there's a sense of like warmth and humor that comes with the sign of Sagittarius that's not that's there's no way for you to like filter it or hide it, in a sense, is what I want to say. Now in the seventh house, what that means that it plays out a little bit more through his relationships or through his partnerships. So whether it's his love life or the relationship that he has with the boys, that's how um his emotional truth comes out, through those dynamics. And that's why we see that playful side to him as well. It's kind of like the teasing parts, sometimes when I think in one of the episodes that they were talking about Lino, how he like sometimes is like almost like bouncing off the walls and he's like hyper and all that stuff. That's where that comes from. So he tends to like almost like pick up the energy or be able to like bounce off the energy to that person. But it comes authentically through that moon in the seventh house. Wow. Okay. Now, Pluto is also in the seventh house. Now, mind you, the other member who has this placement in the seventh house, if he is a Gemini rising, we do know that we have Pang Chang's birth chart, and he also is a Gemini rising with Pluto in the seventh house. Please let me know if that's something that you want me to do an episode on, a full breakdown deep dive. So with Pluto and Sagittarius, it adds a little bit of gravity to his relationships. And through strong chemistry, through like strong energy exchange, there's no like, I'm not trying to say like that it's comes off dramatically, but it's very intense. It's very almost like magnetic. And there is an element of intensity to his relationships. And I feel like I haven't even looked at Han's astrology chart, but I feel like we can definitely see that through that type of dynamic that he has with Han, how like there's this intensity that they share. And it's going to also show up, I feel like the dynamic that he has with stays. I feel like that is in a sense sometimes why he might be like misread um as like the cold member, stuff like that. He's not. It's just he might come very magnetic, because if you compare, you're like, okay, Christina, Pangchan is Gemini rising, Pluto and Sagittarius in the seventh house, but he's not like that. But he's a Libra sun, Libra moon, Libra Mercury. Lino, on the other hand, is Scorpio. So there is a more private energy to him than happy-go-lucky Libra, which is a little bit more conversational socialist, and wanting to have those relationships, as opposed to Scorpio placements, they are a little bit more reserved, more private, and want things to be a little bit more personal. But with that Pluto in the seventh house, can come off to other people as intense. Um, so yes, that's kind of what I wanted to say. Now, I really wanted to return back to this Jupiter in the 10th house, because this is like I was talking, like his public signature. So with Pisces here, it makes, like I was saying, his artistry, which is dance, very ethereal, very spiritual. So he doesn't need to like over explain himself at all, or like overdo the choreography, just because it's already the way that he moves. It's already doing that for him. And that's why I feel like, so people, like some people are really observe that of him and get the way that he dances, is what I'm trying to say. Um Now, when Scorpio in the sixth house feeds into this Pisces, because this um Pisces and Scorpio do kind of make a trine here, with that Chiron and Mercury. We're talking about almost like a depth that turns into like resonance. Because if you've seen, probably the video before this is going to be the Do It Astrology Comeback breakdown. I do talk about Mercury almost being like this megaphone. So it amplifies things. And Jupiter here also is a planet that like makes things bigger. And so you're adding almost like this light, right, onto his 10th house, and also a megaphone. So you're like projecting, announcing, right? And so when you add the sign of Scorpio and Pisces, it's trining this water energy. And so in a way, it's like death that turns into resonance. So it kind of echoes. So he perfects something in private, right? The Scorpio side, but the emotion does echo. It ripples out publicly. Um, so yes. Now something that really also struck me about this chart is because he has so many placements in like 29 degrees, right? He has the nodes at 29 degrees, he has Venus at 0 degrees, he has Saturn at 0 degrees, then he has oh, Neptune. Yeah, there it goes. Neptune at 29 degrees. So he has a lot of like 0 and 29-degree placement, right? And 0 is the beginning of the story. 29 is closing of the story. So he's always balancing himself between beginning something and finishing another thing. And it gives like a mature soul that's like has a youthful spirit, if that makes sense. So you can kind of sense both like his mastery, but also the curiosity about like coexisting within him. And I feel like that's rare to see, because I don't honestly, this is the first time I've seen a chart with like so many zero degrees, because I've seen 0 degrees in a chart, and I'm like, okay, so you might be a little bit childish in certain areas, right? And when I look at 29 degrees, they'll have like two or three 29 degrees. And so with those, it's like, oh, okay, you're like almost like a little bit more mature on this side of the chart or with these topics in your life. But here it's like a combination of both. So it's you could definitely tell that he's very mature and almost like an old soul. But then you get that Sagittarius, like very youthful, young spirit that is like burning within him. So I just think it's like super rare to see, especially coming from like a heavy Scorpio stellium placement, which usually are very like reserved. Think of like if I would have just stared at that Scorpio stellium, it would have given me like almost like Wednesday vibes, if that makes sense. Now, if you do kind of pull back and you combine all this information together, Gemini rising kind of gives you that dynamic of wit and duality because Gemini is a mutable sign. It can adapt, right? And then Scorpio in the sixth house, it gives you discipline, it gives you devotion. And then adding the Sagittarius moon, it adds humor, it adds honesty. And then that Pisces in the 10th house brings that emotional resonance. And obviously with the Taurus in, I'm sorry, with the Saturn in Taurus, it kind of grounds this energy with like how professional he presents himself to be. And honestly, to him, it's not about being like having the spotlight on him. He has a sixth house sun, which I can relate to. It's not about wanting to be the loudest either in the room, but it is about making the smallest changes that are going to last, that are going to count, that are going to make an impact, and making sure that everything is timed perfectly. So, to think of it in choreography terms, because he is like a dancer, it's about making the right moves, right? Am I going to risk, am I going to like move my wrist at this timing? Am I going to like look on this beat, you know? Um, am I going to try and take a breath before this move? So it's all about intentional precision, and it's just giving this devotion. Again, I bring the word devotion because Scorpio and Venus kind of represents that devotion to his mastery, to his craft. And again, that can be probably seen also romantically, and it's just you can kind of see that duality honestly, and I think that is why I went with that 8 p.m. chart. And yeah, so I mean, if there's a moment where we do get a confirmed birth time, it's close to the nighttime, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, it's really important for the time for the rising sign, because with the rising sign, it shows you how his life has developed. Knowing your exact rising sign surprisingly tells you a lot about a person. But again, I personally think that this version really explains why Lino is so like has this duality to him. He's sharp, but he's soft at the same time. And so, I kind of wanted to bring you this interpretation for this particular chart. And if the time comes where we have a confirmed time, we can always revisit it. But I wanted to bring this chart reading for this chart in particular of him, if this is the case, for Lino's birthday. And I know it's already the 25th in Korea, but I am recording this literally Friday, the 24th. But I know we missed Pangchangs, so let me know if you do want me to do that one. I kind of did a short, but it was very like surface level breakdown of his chart on my TikTok and Instagram. But feel free to go check that out. But if you guys want a deep dive like this, with him, I do have an exact birth time, so I can be a little bit more sure what I'm saying there. But I just feel this is pretty accurate to me. You guys let me know in the comments. Do you think he's Gemini rising? He's Scorpio rising? Let me know your thoughts. Does this land? And of course, if you want another idol for me to break down, preferably somebody with a birth time, please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Okay, bye.